Hey everybody, and welcome to another exciting and amazing episode of Finding Peaks. Yours truly, host, president, founder, chief executive officer, Chris Burns. So grateful to be here today with an amazing professional, but even better human, Breeah Kinsella. How are you, my friend?
I'm excellent. I'm in this beautiful space here with you.
Yeah.
Talk about all my favorite things.
I love it. Yeah, Breeah and I just spent about 35 minutes off topic talking about a variety of other things, of which we'll get to a few here shortly, but really excited to have you on. Just an awesome professional and human, but Colorado Provider Association is who you work for. She's the chief executive officer as well. Yeah. How long have you been with them?
About 3 years as of last month.
Cool. And what does kind of like the day-to-day look like as the chief executive officer? I know in your bio, you only had 5 short things, but as we've kind of dialogued back and forth, it's far more comprehensive than that.
Yeah, I can't remember what's in my bio, but oh yes, now I do. Now I remember. So day-to-day looks different depending on the season. Mm-hmm. During the summer and fall, I spent a lot of time traveling around the state, meeting my members, seeing their facilities, sometimes meeting the people that they serve and hearing about the great testimonials of work that's being done across the state. Trying to figure out what their challenges and obstacles are and how we can maybe support fixing those or removing barriers. Also, what else? During January through May, I spend most of my time at the Capitol writing legislation, working on legislation to support providers and the people that they serve. It is very intense.
Yeah, it's an intense season.
It's a very intense season. I have a really wonderful lobbying team and a really great staff who support me during that 6 months to make sure that my members don't fall through the cracks. Mm-hmm. Also, I have 3 amazing staff. I have 5 or 6 amazing contractors who are doing work in evaluations, in the certified peer and family specialist credentialing, the certified prevention specialist credentialing. Our association manager is responsible for networking events, big events, campaigning, policy information, advocacy, working with our members if they ever need anything. Our association manager calls us a concierge style association, which I think is really fun, but really all in all means that I will answer the phone anytime one of my members calls me, even if it's just to catch up. You know, we really value the folks who are a part of COPA. All 4 of us who work for the staff as staff for COPA were providers.
Oh, cool. That is really unique.
So we are in a position that we really want to support people that we know are out there working really hard to save people's lives. Actually, funny story. So I was speaking with one of our members yesterday about some fire code regulation that we're working on for the state in terms of behavioral health entity license. And
I love that.
I called 5 different folks. And what I realized is I always text people before I call if they are treatment providers. I will call directly if they aren't. If they work in prevention, if they work in insurance, if they work in funding, if they're administrator and not a direct service staff, I will call directly. If it is a direct service treatment provider staff, I will text them and wait until they consent for me to call.
They need front facing. I love that.
I didn't realize it until yesterday.
I just do this thing.
Going back and forth with one of our members, trying to figure out when I could call her, and she was like, I told you could call me anytime. And I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah, sorry, I have this thing.
It's apparently a thing, so I figured that out yesterday. So essentially, you know, COPA is just there for whatever our members need, all of the time.
I love it. It's really well integrated, and it feels like you all go into your providers and help inform various treatment modalities, tracks, strengths, weaknesses, and kind of accumulate data and support them in that regard.
Yep, so we don't actually teach them anything because we are prevention folks. All 4 of us are prevention folks, but we are so well connected to the state and the providers who are at the state, like working throughout the state, is that we bring in people that we know would benefit the value of our membership.
I love that.
So, you know, the whole concept of me joining COPA was that the whole vision was that they wanted to build a connected network of providers who were there for each other, right? That was the entire reason that COPA was formed, is so providers could be together and learn from each other and share. And obviously there are a ton of benefits that come from that outside of just personal professional development, but in terms of the quality of access and the quality of care that's provided, because people are connected to everything across the state. So the stuff that we don't know, we can bring people in on. We sit in lots and lots and lots and lots of meetings with various groups, whether it's state departments, legislators, regional area entities, MSOs, whatever, and we synthesize the information they give to us and send it out to our members so that they don't have to sit inside of all of those meetings, right? They can go and do the work that they need to do, and we can do that for them and just give them the pieces that will help them understand how to do their work better.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, really creating synergy within a provider network is like unheard of where I come from. I mean, we were talking a little bit about Arizona. I came to Colorado. I was like, oh my gosh, they have peer services. Oh my gosh, they have even therapeutic communities, opportunities to not go to prison and throw away the key. And some of them are a little bit hard edge, but some of these resources you're talking about, and this is such
Colorado's
a,
awesome.
it's a rad state, like for
is.
sure. And it's my favorite state whatsoever. And if you like seasons, it is the best state. But people work together here.
Yeah.
It's
to varying degrees,
Sure.
but I believe it's getting better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that there's something like you guys that kind of ties that together, because it is when we're all talking and communicating, because it turns out Peaks Recovery is not the best program for everybody. And we need to know who and what is, right?
Yeah.
And we need to understand that as providers, as we can't be the end all be all. And when we can begin to do that, we can inform things like we talked about earlier, is like a really sophisticated recovery path that could potentially inform healing for individuals who need it.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing.
Well, and the idea that recovery doesn't stop or start often at treatment.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
I like to tell people, when ego leaves the building, that's when the real work happens.
There we go.
And that's true for the people that you're serving, and also for the people who are running the organizations.
Yeah.
Right? When we work together, when we collaborate, when we leave our egos at the door, we can work better, provide better services, manage gaps in care, right? People don't fall through the cracks
Right.
if we put our ego down and work together.
Yeah.
You know, and I know y'all say it to your clients.
Absolutely.
I know you do.
100%.
I picked it up listening in the rooms, you know. So it is something that, you know, I share on all kinds of different levels.
Yeah. It's almost like I almost refer to it often as like recovery 2.0. And they're like, what do you mean?
Leveling
like, what?
up.
Yeah, exactly, right? Really, really cool. You know, when I met with you with our pre-call, and even having the opportunity to sit with you, like if I could define you in one word, be fighter.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you are a fighter.
Yeah,
You can
that's
tell
great.
that you're willing to fight passionately for the ones that you serve. And so it's no wonder you're out in front of this organization that's doing such dynamic work in the community. In addition, you come by it so honestly because you're from Mancos, Colorado.
Mancos,
excuse me. Mancos, Colorado. That was in her bio too. And I looked it up and I'm like, oh man, it's on the edge of the San Juans. Really cool area. And then we got into some like deep conversation about history. And I was like, dang it. But
Mancos, you got to say it like you're a cowboy.
Mancos, like Prescott.
like
Prescott, Arizona,
yeah,
and Mancos.
Exactly.
But in Mancos, Colorado, you come by this honestly because rural Colorado. Lots of gaps in services, resources are abysmal. And so I want to check in a little bit of like, you know, what kind of got you into the field? Were you beginning to see gaps in your community, or what made you so passionate about that part?
So I actually got into the field because I'm a prevention specialist. Right? I've been a prevention provider. Prevention provider for decades now. And it actually started because I was in the military.
Okay.
Now, probably even earlier than that. So I come from a family that has a long history with substance use disorder. My grandmother was a 12-stepper. She knew Bill W. I've been in the rooms my whole life. I have lost many of my family members to substance use disorder. And yeah, it was just something that I saw in my rural community that I grew up in the Central Valley of California. Meth was huge in the 90s, 80s, and 90s in rural California. And I came from a law enforcement family, and I thought, oh, hey, I can help. I can help this problem. I can help people not die if I go and do drug enforcement. And so I was in the Coast Guard, and I was a drug enforcement officer, and I, was a boarding team member and did all kinds of stuff in drug enforcement and immigration that made me feel really uncomfortable. And I watched substance use disorder run rampant through the military. And nothing that we did from a punitive approach felt effective to me. I felt like the strategies that I had been taught, that I was currently participating in, were actually harming people more. So when I got out of the military after 8 years, I tried for a very short time to work for Anheuser-Busch.
I don't see you doing well there.
I did not do well. I did not do well, and contrary to me joining the military, I am not great with authority as a whole. And
You seem like a free thinker.
Yeah, authority is a struggle for me. Obviously, I've gotten better at it because we learned to code. But what I saw in Anheuser-Busch was people with substance use disorders getting at least 1 case per month of alcohol free, and substance use culture being really embraced. So obviously I didn't last there very long. So I joined AmeriCorps. I gave up all my money and I joined AmeriCorps, and I started working at AmeriCorps in St. Louis. If you're familiar with downtown St. Louis, the schools are underfunded. Gang activity is really high. Over-policing in Black and brown communities is really bad. It's the corruption in St. Louis Police Department is really well known. And I was there in the early 2000s.
Oh, wow.
And ended up doing gang prevention. It was a reading position, like a reading tutor position that they initially put me in. But that work led me into the detention centers, into the youth facilities, working with the Division of Youth Services, working on debate teams and clubs inside detention centers, all of this stuff, right? And watching the kids that I was working with inside of the schools come in and out of the detention centers that I was also volunteering my time in, right? So the school to prison pipeline was a brand new concept, and we didn't call it prevention then. We just did the things that we knew were going to increase protective factors for kids who had really high risk factors, right? So now when I think about it, it's like, oh yeah, I was increasing protective factors and decreasing risk factors, not knowing that is the core foundation of prevention, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
we're doing this thing. It's called nothing.
So this started in the early 2000s is when I started my career, and I got really passionate about it. And I realized that I really loved the kids that I was working with. I'm still connected to some of them today. They're beautiful, beautiful young people. And I did not like their parents very much. Also, I was a young white woman in a predominantly Black community and did not understand almost everything.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, all I knew was what I saw and how I had been raised. And so I didn't like working with adults, but I loved the kids, and it was amazing. A couple years into that, I lost a young person to police violence in my arms, and it was really terrible. And my husband and I, at the time, who was working in homeless services and was a peer, even though they didn't have peers then, my husband and I really decided that it was probably best for my youngest daughter and us to leave the state. And a part of that was because I did not feel like, or I felt like I was receiving too much positive attention because of how I present instead of who I was. Right. And I didn't feel like I knew enough to be getting the attention that I was getting. And so I wanted to take it to a community that felt more aligned with the power structures that I understood.
Sure.
I felt like I shouldn't be there telling everyone that I was an expert when I literally had no idea what I was doing, right? I was a kid. And when I first started, I thought I could change the world. And as I grew further and further into the work, I realized that was a really privileged white savior thing that I was doing, and I was in the wrong place. And so when we decided to leave, we obviously moved to rural Colorado, which is much to my surprise, a tri-ethnic community, but in my mind was wider than where I was.
Right.
Right, and so
Yeah.
that was a place that fit me better and did not take away from the Black women specifically who were doing the work in St. Louis. And so when I got to Southwest Colorado, I would really, I don't know if you know this about Southwest Colorado, but there's not a lot of jobs.
Yeah, exactly. There's 2, and then drive 50 miles, and there's 3.
So there's not a lot of jobs out there, and so for a couple years, I just worked random jobs and really got to know the community, right? So I worked at a church. I was a youth pastor. I worked at the train. So
cool.
if you've ever been on the Durango-Silverton
Yeah.
Railroad, I was the person taking the pictures.
She's been in some of the most beautiful areas you can ever imagine.
So at the time, I was really disappointed that I could not find work that was meaningful to me. It actually felt really heavy to me that I could not be successfully in my role,
Yeah.
right? But what I realized is that learning that community and getting to know the people and really enmeshing myself in the Durango Shuffle is what it's called, where you have 4 people living with you and you're working 3 jobs and you still can't really make ends meet, and they double up your food stamp money at the farmer's market so you can have healthy food stuff, and bro deals for shoes and whatever, right? What I learned is all of that stuff, really, all of that hardship prepared me for what was next, right? And so when I ended up taking over Celebrating Healthy Communities, when I started working at Celebrating Healthy Communities, which is the last place I was before here, I knew what it meant to be a community member there, which was the reason I left St. Louis, right? Because in St. Louis, I was a white person in social services coming into a community telling them how to be better. And in La Plata County, Montezuma County, that region, I was a part of the community, working with my community members, my neighbors, my friends, my loved ones, to build something that was better for us. Together. Yeah. Always together,
Powerful.
right? So that passion really came from me acknowledging that I was in the wrong place. Like those kids, I love those kids. Love them. I'm so glad for my time with them. Yeah. Like I loved my time with them, and the women that I worked with were amazing, and the mothers and grandmothers who brought me in and taught me about respect and fried chicken and
culture and love
and like learning my place in people's lives, right? Like I'll carry those with me forever. But through the hardship times of La Plata County, Montezuma County, I was really doing the thing that I was trying to figure out how to do in St. Louis.
Exactly. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So even thinking about all of the hardship, right? I needed those things to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
Because the community is facing hardship. And if I don't face it too, how in the heck am I supposed to tell anyone anything?
Yeah, you went enlisted. I think that's the best way to go. Yeah. It's like, let's go sit with the people.
Well, and it wasn't even listening, right? It was experiencing.
Yeah.
Right? You and I talked about earlier, I don't have a substance use disorder. Who am I to tell anyone with a substance use disorder what's best for them? I'm not.
Right.
And I can listen all day long. All day long I can listen to a person talk about having a substance use disorder and what that means to them, and I still don't know what they mean.
Yeah, like at a core level.
At a core level. But when someone talks about being a part of a poor, rural, or frontier community, I got it.
Yeah. It's so cool. Like as you're sitting here describing like the story and the evolution of your career and the people that you've impacted and communities you've moved into, I almost see like somebody going around doing push-ups in this area. Doesn't feel right. Go push-ups over here, only to get to this spot where you are today, which is really, really beautiful, well-intended, and you're very, very passionate about the team that you lead and the position you hold. What was it initially about COPA that was like, these people got it going on?
Connected network of providers.
Yeah.
That was it. So, I was, for almost 10 years, I worked for Celebrating Healthy Communities, first as the program manager and then as the executive director. And the whole point of COPA of Celebrating Healthy Communities, CHC, was to build a connected network of providers and partners in Montezuma and La Plata counties, right? So from Bayfield, Ignacio, Durango, Hesperus, Mancos, Cortez, and into Dolores and Dove Creek, right? Like we're talking the literal four corners where it's 1,600 square miles to drive through La Plata County with only 50,000 people.
Oh my goodness.
So the whole point was to build this connected network of people providing services to support, at that time, young people, right? But remember I told you like I didn't like adults when I was working with kids, and somewhere along my transition, what I realized is that adults are really struggling. Adults are really struggling, and the kids are in turn struggling harder.
Yep.
And if we don't support the whole unit and we don't build a community that supports both adults and youth adult partnerships, everyone's gonna struggle, right? Yep. And so that was, we had, at the time when I started, we had 44 partner organizations who worked in coalition with us on both substance use and suicide prevention. Oh, wow. But what we know in prevention is that if you are preventing suicide, you are also preventing substance use. You're also preventing teen pregnancy. You're also preventing truancy and violence and all of these things, right? And the whole part of Celebrating Healthy Communities was to build a community so strong that no matter what happened from the outside, we had each other, right? And we did it, and we did it, and it was struggle. And we really changed stuff. And so when I saw COPA and their application and their vision and their job description and all of that stuff, first of all, randomly, I had every skill that they needed, which is random because I told you, like, my day-to-day is wild.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
My day-to-day is wild.
You're just getting started.
Like, it is a random, unique set of skills that it takes to run an association. Most people can't even wrap their head around what an association does.
Fortified in the pandemic.
Right, 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 because yes, you're absolutely right. Right, so the thing is that I used to work for an association. I used to run a training and development department for an association in Texas. So I had this unique understanding of what association boards look like, right? I was a provider, so I knew like what providers needed, right? They really wanted to diversify. They wanted to expand beyond the Front Range, right? They wanted rural and frontier providers to be at the table. I just happen to be a rural and frontier provider, right? They wanted to see an increase in diversity across racial and like economic lines, right? They wanted small providers. They wanted big providers. They wanted Black, brown, indigenous providers. They wanted queer providers, right? They wanted a really diverse, robust group of providers because we can't create solid, accessible, equitable provision of services if the people providing the services don't fit in that, right? And I just happen to be working in anti-racism, like providing for decades, right? I come from this framework, right? I am connected to all of these. And it was so funny when I came for my interview. So I had a Zoom interview, right? Because we're on the tail end of COVID. We're in the tail end of COVID, right? And so I'm Zooming from my little house in Mancos while my parents are hanging siding on my little tiny house. Right? And
my little bungalow.
I'm doing my little Zoom meeting, and it was really great. And then they called me back and said, hey, would you mind coming here in like 2 days? Right? So if y'all don't know, Mancos is like 8 hours from Denver. And luckily, my mom and dad were there, and they were like, yeah, we'll watch the kid go. 1, 2, 3, go. And so I get up here, and I remember talking to my program assistant at the time, who's now my association manager. And I said, I'm 99% sure that they're going to love me. But what's going to be the funniest is that if I know someone in there who's interviewing, because I told them how connected I am at the state.
Oh, that'd
right?
be wild.
Like across the state,
Yeah.
right? So I walk in to this interview, and there are 2 people on the screen and 4 people in the room, and I look up at the screen, and there's Tanya Wheeler. And if you're in recovery, you know who Tanya
Dude.
Wheeler is, right? And I also knew Tanya Wheeler
cool.
because Tanya Wheeler was a part of a coalition that I was on to reduce opioid use in Southwest Colorado. And so I walk in, I'm like, hey, Tanya.
Say hey, Breeah.
And so I left, and I texted Sydney, and I was like, yep, Tanya was in the call.
Oh my goodness.
And so that idea that a connected network of providers started in that room that day because I was already connected.
That's cool.
And
That is rad.
that to me, that was it.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, this is how I know I'm in the right place.
Yeah, and the fact that like it's such like an oblong like the job description, you know, and what it
It's wild.
entails. Hey, we need you to like actually have been in all corners of Colorado and actually
also
done
know
some
how to
work.
run a budget and grow funding and diversify funds and run programs too. And I'm like, yeah, I can do all that.
Prior to that, you're like, gosh, what should I do? You know, like, it's like, oh my goodness, because I'm great at this and I do this. That is
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
How that
Well,
all came together.
And it goes back to that thing that I was talking about in terms of, you know, I was sitting in these spaces where I didn't think I was doing anything that was valuable based on what I wanted to be doing, right? I was running a health center. I was running photographs and trains and youth groups and all this stuff. And all of those things led to having the skills that I needed to run COPA.
Yeah.
And also the staff.
Yeah.
Because my certification manager was my program assistant 8 years ago.
Oh wow.
My association manager was my program assistant 3 years ago.
Jeez.
I was calling her from her desk in my old office as I was driving here. So she's been with me for 4 years, right? Rural prevention providers.
Gets it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just connect.
Yeah. Synergizing Colorado.
Yeah.
Breeah Kinsella. Let's go. That is so cool.
Man, I couldn't do it without the providers, obviously. We currently have 50 members.
Wow.
And growing
Good.
every day. And while each organization has one vote on our board, we represent their entire organizations.
That's cool.
Right? Like I represent hundreds of people in the state.
Yeah.
You know, I take calls from hundreds of people.
So you kind of have to be in Denver.
Kind of.
Yeah, kind of,
It's still questionable. It's
Yeah,
still
that's
questionable. You know, I still have my house in Mancos. My daughter graduates in a year and a half.
She's still down there?
Yeah, she's
Okay.
no, she's here in
Here,
Denver.
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, one of the reasons that we moved here was so that she could go to a better school because Mancos High School has 50 students in her graduating class.
I had 90 in Sedona Red Rock.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty rural out there.
Yeah, it's very frontier.
Yeah.
Mancos is frontier. So yeah, so she wanted a change, and I, you know, because I worked in suicide prevention, we suffered a lot of loss in our community, and we did a lot of work with families who suffered loss and were struggling, and without the services that we needed to really support that, the prevention people are really all you got, right? So if you don't have therapists who don't take Medicaid or therapists who don't take indigent care funds, or you don't have a treatment facility or even outpatient treatment, right? Or you have one that doesn't have enough space for everyone who needs
It's
it.
got 12 seats.
What ends up happening is that the prevention folks, and when I started there weren't very many, but there are more now, recovery folks have to step into those positions where clinicians should be stepping in.
Yeah.
And which is fine,
Yeah.
right? Because I believe in
next best thing.
I believe in community,
Absolutely.
but you know, any clinician, any peer, any person working in a helping industry will tell you that secondary trauma is real, especially when secondary trauma is directly tied to death and violence. And so, you know, my daughter asked if she could come here to go to a better school, and I was really tired. We had a situation happen in Mancos where one of my people passed away, and the other one, it was a murder-suicide situation, teenagers at the high school next door to my house. That was the last that was the last program I really ran, was the response to that situation. And so when my daughter asked, hey, can we go? I said, yep.
Check out a different
it's
scene.
time.
Yeah.
It's time.
At least for the season.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. And
But I still support and represent the people I left behind there.
yeah. I know you wouldn't leave there without doing
I would
that.
never.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would never.
That's
Yeah,
why I
would
still
never
hear
leave
you.
my
Like, I
people.
still got a house there, so we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah.
See how the
Yeah.
season turns.
No, those are my people.
That's cool. You can tell. I love how you fight passionately for the people that you serve, personally and professionally. Really, really cool. And something that's came up that's kind of off topic. We've talked about it, and I think it'd be cool for the viewers to get kind of your explanation on it. We talked about it earlier before the show. We kind of I referred to it as Recovery 2.0.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool for people to understand, when we're getting into recovery, it's not about substances. It's not necessarily about the depression. It's about this multifaceted approach that takes a lot of underpinnings to inform quality of life.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can paint for the viewers a little bit, like, how do you help folks in community get on that path towards their success? And because when I got into recovery, I swear at 22, I was like, if I just quit doing heroin, life is going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Because it causes
I mean,
all
I'm
my
sure it
problems.
is a little bit helpful.
It definitely helps.
Heroin
the risk factors go down.
Can be, struggle bus.
Back then it was the Oxycontin stuff.
Right.
So same thing. But
Yeah.
so how do we get into that Recovery 2.0? Why is it so important for people to know about that process?
That's a really good question, actually, and I know that I was supposed to prepare for that, but
It's off the list.
it is off the list. It's a really good question because there is no starting point,
Yeah.
right? Because if I could magically, like, shake my wand and change the landscape of the world that we live in, then this would be so much easier, right? I'd be like, everyone has everything that they need, and there are no risk factors by which you have to live, and no trauma.
Everybody has food to eat.
Right, you have food, you have housing, your parents aren't stressed, like you understand the risks of substances in your life, right? Like, if I could, right? That's really how you fix it, right? So in not being able to do that, I think the start of it is just understanding where people are coming from, right? And not I've been there, I've integrated, I'm also living this life, although that is really helpful, it turns out.
Yeah.
Actually, I was teasing about something that was happening in Memphis the other day, and a person that doesn't like me very much came on and was like, well, you don't understand because you don't live here anymore.
Ooh.
I was like,
yeah.
All right, good luck with that.
Right. That's right.
But so outside, that really does help integrating in the world,
Yeah.
right? And not just, I'm the savior, come in to tell you what the science says and how you're going to fix it, but actually understanding it, but really being able to understand that people are really meeting us in places that we might not understand.
Right.
And that's okay,
Yeah.
right?
That's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that I don't understand what it means to have a substance use disorder. That does not mean that there are people with substance use disorders who do not ask me questions all of the time.
Absolutely.
All of the time, right? And in that, what it does is it builds a relationship.
Yeah.
It is not a therapeutic relationship, although there might be therapeutic outcomes that come from it. It is not a professional relationship. It is a relationship. And I think that one thing is the key. And the way that we look at relationships and the way that we intention relationships and the way that we intersect our relationships, right? So we did a lot of work in Southwest Colorado around youth-adult partnerships, because what we saw was that our kids were dying at alarming rates through suicide and substance use. And their biggest complaint, when surveyed repeatedly, was that they felt like the adults didn't care about them.
Yeah.
76% of young people felt like kids didn't care about them. On the flip side, because remember I told you about how I hated parents, and then I figured out that like parents were actually really struggling too. On the flip side, we surveyed the parents, and the parents, 74% of the parents said that they valued and tried to show their young people that they were valued. So we saw a very opposite response, and what we figured and what we thought about and what we researched was that adults thought they were acting in a way that was valuing young people, but the young people weren't receiving it because they wanted a different kind of care. And so what we ended up doing was involving the whole community in youth adult partnerships. We
Yeah.
trained them what it was. We taught young people how to work with adults. We taught older people how to work with young people. We taught the community, the cities, the counties, how to build youth-focused events inside of the drinking culture events that were happening.
Yeah.
Like, we worked with the newspapers who were saying wildly inappropriate things about young people and suicide and all of this stuff. So we taught the community how to have relationships with each other.
That's cool.
And I absolutely believe that that is how you start doing Recovery 2.0.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's what I do with COPA members too, right? Where you might not know that provider who's out in La Junta,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I hear him say something and it reminds me a lot of you, and so I'm gonna be like, hey Chris, you should meet this guy,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So it's also something I do here, right? That is called community organizing. What I did at Celebrating Healthy Communities was community organizing, but really all it is facilitating relationship building.
Yeah. Meet him, meet her, meet this person, meet this. connect
Also,
with
here's
this.
this
You like some-
exciting new thing I learned.
Yeah.
You guys should talk about it.
Yeah.
We should talk about how to implement this. Does this work for you, right? So if you start at relationship, not I'm here to save you, not I know more than you, not anything, just, hey, let's sit in a room and talk about hiking,
Right.
right? And then you start to trust me and I start to trust you. We did it. We built a community right here in this room.
It's a beautiful thing. And I love that you hit on that. Because when I got into recovery, I was isolated, disconnected, and all alone. And I told myself a story that I wasn't valuable enough
Sure.
to be a part of because of the 74% study that you talked about.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I was shown that. I didn't feel like the child-adult relationships that I had informed that. And so I love that you said that, because when one becomes two, we become stronger. And I love the opportunity in recovery to simply split our hardships and our victories 50-50.
Yeah.
It's one of the coolest and most simple things to be a part of. And you do it so well. Like your story of impact is like a lion, like going around just being like, see nothing to eat here, and just keep moving and helping people and like leading the charge. And now you got more lions and lionesses and people, and now it's fortified. And you tell a really beautiful story that
I do want to caution this, because, while I do feel like a lion sometimes,
Love it.
Truly I do, and I'm like tearing out necks at people who come for my people, kind of,
Yeah.
right? I do feel like that sometimes, but I do want to be really clear that Precious, Sydney, Katie, my staff, carry me often.
I love that.
And I myself have a very connected network of people who support me and hold me accountable and let me lose my shit sometimes, right? And a perfect example of this, because I do want to make sure that I feel like an actual human being and not this like wild warrior woman, is that something happened in session last year, that I knew was going to lead to people's death. And I knew it was going to fail, or I knew it was going to pass, and I knew that there was nothing I could do about it. And I got home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and my kid had left my house a mess, and my dog had gotten into the trash. And I took the trash can and I threw it at the dog, and I screamed at the kid and all of that stuff. And then I called my friend, who's also an executive director of a program that he is very passionate about. And I said, I'm broken, I can't do this. And he was like, that's okay.
Gotcha.
That's okay. So lion, yes.
Yeah.
Human also.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
really important, right? Like, I really I worry that people like think that I'm this warrior who is never ending. I feel like it leads to a perception that you have to be perfect to do what I do.
Yeah, I think for me, your story really speaks to the multitude of interactions, relationships, and connections that you've been so privileged and so grateful to come upon in your career.
So
And it
lucky.
is so
Oh my
like,
gosh, so
I was saying the other day on my
So
Instagram, I was
lucky.
like, my headstone will read, I was lucky enough to be surrounded with great people.
Yeah.
Like just great people. Like, who am I? I look to my right
So
and my
lucky.
left, just like you, and I'm like, holy holy smokes, this
Yeah.
is cool.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that. I really do. And one of the things I want to get to, and it's actually my favorite question to ask people because it tends to be the most personal. Because it always starts there before it goes professional, and passionately professional in a lot of directions. And so I wanted to wrap up today's show with just asking you, you've obviously shown for the viewers today that you have a lot of passion, a lot of compassion, empathy, insight, connectedness within our communities, our behavioral health systems, and our provider networks. But you tell a really formidable story that kind of pushed you in this direction, certainly where you sit today and the people that you get to help. And so I just wanted to ask you, what is your why?
Yeah,
Why do you continue to do this?
I love this question. Precious, our credentialing manager, she asked this question and
cool name.
kind of forces us to focus on that often when things seem like a lot. So, I told you, I work with a lot of young people who I loved a lot and really kind of pushed me in this direction. But I was feeling like I was kind of stagnant in Durango, working for the train and the hospital or the college and stuff. And in 2011, my husband, who had been in recovery for 9 years, went back out, returned to use. And he rapidly went from drinking to someone else's pills to, me searching for him under beds every single day. And by May, he had died by suicide because of his substance use. He was in liver failure. I found him in a basement, feeling just about that low in his shame. And my daughter at the time was 3 and a half. And he died on Easter. And my little baby said, you should have helped him more. And of course, she couldn't see that I was crawling in through his, kitchen window on the daily, right? Like begging him to stop drinking and waiting for God to come and fix it. And there was this moment that I remember after he died, because it was a very hellacious 6 months with him. He deteriorated very quickly, and he went from a person who was running homeless services as a peer, working through Hurricane Katrina and all of the refugees that came through from her. Like, he was amazing, making national news about this work that he was doing, to, hiding under the bed, covering himself with a sleeping bag because he was afraid that I would find him. He was so ashamed, and he felt so much shame. And I went back and forth between, like, I'm going to murder you if you don't get yourself together, to begging and pleading that he please come help me with his daughter, right? But I remember one moment very, very clearly where my friends and I walked into his house, and he was passed out on the floor, and he was definitely overdosing. And before we called the police, before we called the hospital, we considered picking his body up, putting it in the driver's seat of his car, and turning it on and calling about an impaired driver so that he would go to prison, because he had been to prison before. He had a felony for substance use, and they would send him back because of that. It was 2012. It was the wild time, the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
And we really, really considered, because we knew what was going to happen. They were going to come pick him up. They were going to pump his stomach. They were going to get him right, and then they were going to discharge him, because there was nowhere else for him to go.
Yeah.
There were no services. There were no, therapy was so expensive. The community mental health center that we had at the time didn't have space to see him. They were the last people to talk to him.
Treatment's thousands of dollars.
Treatment is thousands of dollars. I actually looked and looked and looked all over the state to try and find a treatment facility for him, because I knew he needed treatment. Like, I knew enough about behavioral health, right? I studied social work for my master's degree, and I knew enough about knowing what he needed. But the only thing I could find that we could afford to pay for, because remember, I was like working as a part-time healthcare assistant and a youth pastor. I had no money, none. And I found a place for him in Fort Collins that was run by the church that we had left in St. Louis, and they agreed to pay for him to go there. I didn't know that Step Denver existed at the time. I would have sent him there immediately. Sure. But one of the things I remember when I was going through all of this, right, because not only am I taking care of my husband who is very, very sick, also trying to take care of my very young daughter, and also trying to take care of myself.
Yeah, it turns out. Yeah.
Right? Like trying to take care of myself in this really poor community, right? And what I remember thinking after he died and my daughter looked at me and said, "You didn't help him enough," was, if I have anything to do with this, no other mother will ever have to feel this again. And it took me a little while. I had to gain a couple more skills before I got to COPA, or even before I got to CHC. I had to gain a few things that I needed to help me build an organization and build a prevention system that I believed would work. But the moment I stepped into my role at Celebrating Healthy Communities, I knew that that's where that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like I knew in my heart of hearts, and because data,
Because
you know, our hearts are awesome, but also like data wins the show
data,
here.
yeah.
I knew that building that community would make it a place where no other mother had to feel alone in that situation. Because here's the thing, all of those mothers that I sat with as they lost their young children, as they themselves struggled with their own mental health challenges, as they sat with their husbands, or the amount of men and farmers, God bless them, they are the highest risk for suicide in our state, sitting with people who literally differ than you on almost every single topic except your love for each other and the community is such a gift. And to watch a person that you've sat with struggle to live and see them 8 years later thriving, happy, and healthy, like that is a job well done. And there's no amount of data, right? It's very hard to collect that data, right? But being able to see, and this is why they're still my people, right?
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. Like being able to see them happy, healthy, and thriving when they were like on the brink. Like it's brilliant. That my why happens so often that I never really have a chance to fix it or to like forget it. You know what I mean? Like
beautiful.
It's amazing. And even here, right, working where people are generally happy, healthy, and thriving, right? And knowing that my people who are happy, healthy, and thriving are the ones doing that work that I did there, I know how much that hurts. And so while I'm not dealing with it in the same way, I'm there supporting people and hopefully making it just that much easier for them to like work through what they are also working through in their secondary trauma.
Yeah. Wow. I absolutely love that, and I connect with you on a lot of that why. And thank you so much for taking an experience and fortifying it into community so that others don't have to walk through what you did. And I would have to imagine 9-10 years later, right?
Yeah.
Your daughter would say something like, "That's my mom."
Yeah, okay, so my daughter is rad. My daughter is super rad, and she's a little activist, and I love her a lot. She's super, super passionate, and obviously she doesn't remember her dad, but she knows that I've been working for her dad since she can remember. She knows my why, you know? And she is 16, so she doesn't always say it outright. But I heard her talking about me the other day.
Oh, wait.
Yeah,
That's cool.
and I was like, oh, she's talking about me. She's acting proud of me. But when we first moved to Denver, we live in this beautiful house in Cheeseman Park in Denver, which of course we share with 4 other families, but you can't tell. You can't tell looking at it, right? Like it just looks like a big, beautiful home, right? And my daughter came out to visit on her 13th birthday. Because I had moved up here first and then she followed once I found a place to live. So I took her there before we could move in. She was moving in like a week later. I took her there and she has her little hands on her hips and she's looking up at this giant house and she goes, "Mom, you did it."
Oh my God.
Oh, my heart.
Like, let's go
that was taking me to the grave.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that is so cool. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing so openly with our viewers, the Peaks Recovery family, and what COPA is doing in the community. And Personally and professionally, I'm just grateful to know you and be connected with you. Is there anything, how do people find information about COPA? Website?
coprovidersassociation.org has everything you need to know about us.
Okay.
We're also on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook.
Okay.
Our association manager, Sydney, is the bee's knees
Let's
at
go.
social media. So if we know it, you're knowing next.
That's so cool. Well, check them out, COPA. Thank you so much again, Breeah.
Yeah.
It's been amazing having you on the show. Breeah Kinsella, everybody. Thank you so much. Peace.